Hi, my name is Blaise Moran. I'm the author of a new book that's available as a Kindle book only, not as print on demand because it's very long, called The Unethical Bible. It is the world's first complete statistical survey of the human ethics of the Bible. I've taken the stories and summarized the Bible down from about 800,000 words to about 150,000 words, and then I also made a running commentary on its stories and the ethical worth of their stories. Frequently, stories are touted as being admirable in the Bible when, if you judge them by today's standards, you discover that they're actually rather horrific. I also color-coded throughout the text, and I can't know if you can really see it here, the various levels of good and bad. There are fair, generous, and loving things, which are good. There are evil and unethical things that the characters do, and then there are also ridiculous and hypocritical things. So anyway, this is the first of a series of readings from the book. And I'm going to choose a few parts that are either famous or are touted as being a certain level of importance. First one are the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments appear twice in the Bible, once in Exodus and another time in Deuteronomy. There are multiple other rules within the Bible, within these books, that discuss other things, dietary laws, property rights, ownership, marriage, slaves, things like that. But the Ten Commandments appear first and are somehow implied that they might be of more importance as a result of that. This is a curious thing because, as you'll see, some of them are and some of them, definitely aren't, at least on an interhuman scale. So anyway, here's my thoughts on these famous 10 rules. Number 1. Don't worship other gods but me. Or as I say in the book, don't kiss another god's ass but mine. That's God speaking. Why not? As you'll see, if you read the Bible never provides any type of comparative list of attributes that God has that his contemporaries don't. That merits him being the world's preeminent deity. Moses just says, only worship this one, without ever bothering to say why. Such a list, comparative list, would enumerate the unique things that he does and offers, and advocates that the contemporary gods don't. And it would also give justifiable verification that he, in fact, created the universe, and all the animals and everything, and the other gods didn't. Without just Moses claiming that by stating so. Well, that's the case because I said so. Well, no, it isn't. Not in my book. This commandment oddly acknowledges polytheism, which I've highlighted as a ridiculous thing, because it doesn't say that other gods don't exist. It just says to worship this one first, which is acknowledging their existence. If there weren't any other gods, and this does happen a little later on in the Bible, it does say, there aren't any other gods and you're just talking to thin air. Number 2, no carved statues of anything in heaven or under the earth or in the water under the earth. If you kiss another god's ass but mine, I'll make the next 4 generations pay for it. Anyone who loves and obeys me, I'll show mercy to. Well, that's blaming innocent children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren for something they didn't do. And those are all 4 things are highlighted as an unethical thing to do, blaming the innocent. People who obey, like he said, don't need mercy, so that's backwards. And there's no such thing as the water under the earth, although there are aquifers of water, but that's not what they were referring to. Number 3. No using God's name in a naughty way. Although this is the only 100% obeyed commandment in the biblical text, nobody ever says God damn it in the Bible, it's likely the most disobeyed by modern people, as one can hear that expression 50 times a day, and usually do. Of course, God does so many horrid things on his own that adding to the pile of atrocities that he's amassed by swearing by him shouldn't garner any more attention than a fart. Number 4, take Saturdays off. That means men and their sons, daughters, male and female servants, livestock, and any visiting strangers who happen to be staying with you. This rule, unethically, demeans wives and mothers by intentionally neglecting to mention them getting the day off. It's okay for your cow to put its hooves up, but wifey still has to cook, clean, do laundry, and wipe your butt. This law and the oddly omitted mention of the death penalty offense that it carries with it in other parts of the book is one that I'm proposing a hypothetical foundation for. Priests wanted the laity to have to be in temple in order to be sure that they were there to offer their weekly tithe. If folks were out doing chores, they could say, well, we were busy, we'll get it to you later. Number 5, honor mom and dad so you'll live long. Well, parents tell their kids to honor them long before kids can comprehend what a God is, but this rule is highlighted as obviously fair or a good rule. The fact that it says this so you'll live long doesn't encourage it for its goodness' own sake, but to avoid dying young, which I've highlighted as evil, as that's a backhanded death threat. Number 6, don't kill humans. On the face of it, this rule is good, and it is highlighted as such, as humans should not kill each other except in self-defense. But this statement is the Bible's most hypocritical rule, as God commits, and has several of his prophets commit, genocide, filicide, mass murder a dizzying number of times. Therefore, it really should read, you can't kill anyone unless pre-approved by God, who can slaughter anyone he wants. Also, the Hebrews do have death penalty offenses which involves killing people. If it said don't murder, that might be a little more clear. 7, no sex with anyone but your spouse. Being that the Bible supports polygamy, occasionally on a massive scale, Solomon had 700 wives, one might ask, which spouse? This rule almost certainly only applies to women, as the Bible lists methods of determining whether or not they've cheated, and there are numerous rules about judging the ones who have, but no such rules for men. Number 8, don't steal. Again, as with don't kill, this advice is good and it's highlighted as such, but it's also hypocritical, as God offers to steal land, golds, livestock, and virgins for the Hebrews constantly. He also steals from the Egyptians by brainwashing them to, quote, lend their treasures to the Hebrews when they were leaving Egypt, which the Hebrews never returned. Number 9, don't bear false witness against your neighbor or tell lies against your neighbor. Supposedly, this is fair, but this might read, don't tell lies about your neighbors. Don't tell lies to your neighbors, although I admittedly may be wrong that way on that. I support this by asking how one could tell the truth about a neighbor, against a neighbor. And number 10, don't crave other people's stuff, whether it's animals or things. As with the rules for kill and steal, this one is fair and hypocritical, as God tempts the Hebrews with promises of other people's land, food, virgins, livestock, and servants, and precious metals an unimaginable amount of times within the Old Testament and the Bible. He shouldn't tell them not to want, when all he's doing constantly is telling them to go get. There are astonishing omissions in the above rules when considering the Bible in its entirety, the Old Testament and the New Testament. As Christians believe the New Testament trumps the Old Testament, and taking into account that Jesus is the Old Testament God's Son, something that a lot of people have a hard time understanding because of his violent nature, there should be several additional commandments based on Jesus' New Testament edicts, all of which would seem to be of greater importance than the first 4 commandments, which, as you'll see if you read the New Testament, Jesus intentionally avoids ever mentioning. Notably, number 1, that says, don't have other gods before me, because he's claiming a divine association. Here are my other suggestions. There are 5. Number 11, believe in my son Jesus when he shows up 1,000 years from now and you'll get eternal life. 12, blaspheming the Holy Spirit, which is something you'll find out about later on too, is the greatest sin. That happens in Matthew 12. 13. Treat people the way you'd want to be treated by them. Basically, the golden rule. Nothing like this edict ever appears in the Old Testament, and it's only mentioned by Jesus once. Despite this, many people believe it's a commandment, as well it should be. 14. Jesus' followers must be born again. That's in John 3. But it only occurs in John 3. Despite that, everybody's, all born-again Christians, all seem to think that that's a hard set rule, even though he only mentioned this once, and doesn't mention it other times when he's talking about getting into heaven. 15. Love your fellow humans. In case you didn't notice, not a single commandment, this is not a commandment. In fact, not a single one of the 10 rules that I listed above advocate any kind of generosity or love towards all other people. And there is only one almost generous rule in the paragraphs that follow the one that Exodus 20. As Jesus takes it upon himself to add love your neighbors and love your enemies several times in the New Testament, and stresses that it's number 2 in importance to worshiping God, it should probably be here. Many people wonder justifiably why certain other things aren't a commandment or are absent in the laws that follow. 4 prime examples are: don't enslave people, don't demean or oppress people who worship other gods, as is none of your business whose ass they kiss, and of course, women aren't property, they get equal rights. If this next edict I've recommended were included somewhere in the Bible, then the statistics I found in this book would be dramatically different and more favorable to believers, as it would eliminate 1.7 million murders that I tracked within the Bible, all of which are evil. The hearsay of one person is not adequate justification for invading other countries and murdering the populace. That should be a rule. The internet abounds with multiple other suggestions. What is truly amazing and sad is how quickly Hebrews and Christians forego these rules about coveting and stealing and theft as soon as they conflict with their own interests, be they need or greed. When anarchy erupts due to famine or natural disaster, humans in a very, very short time forego these rules in order to stay alive. As in the Bible, Christian governments have overthrown their rivals, murdered innocent people, and stolen their land and resources without a second thought in order to satisfy their own greed for wealth and power. This says little for the true respect of these rules, and even less for how comforting it would be if God wrote them when he himself tells people, his own prophets and people, to do the contrary. Those are my thoughts on the 10 Commandments. We'll see what I come up with.